A quiet welcome to Restful Historian. Settle in as we gently explore the history of why you wouldn't survive a day as a peasant accused of witchcraft. Before we begin, if you find value in these stories, perhaps take a quiet moment to like the video and subscribe. It helps others find the channel. You can also let me know in the comments where you're listening from and the time. It's always fascinating to see our quiet community grow around the world. Now, find a comfortable position. Perhaps dim the lights or turn on a soft fan for background noise. And let's ease into tonight's story together. Let's drift back, shall we, into a time before the relentless hum of electricity, before the comforting certainty of science lit up every shadowed corner. Imagine a world draped in a perpetual twilight, painted in muted shades of gray, ochre, and brown. Light itself was a precious, fleeting thing. The hesitant flicker of a tallow candle casting long, dancing shadows that could morph familiar objects into something unsettling, or the diffuse glow of a low sun struggling through a small, often horn-covered window pane. The very air you might breathe would feel different, heavier perhaps, thick with the scent of wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint, ever-present aroma of unwashed linen and livestock nearby. Here, the night isn't just an absence of light, it's a tangible presence, pressing in from the vast, untamed wilderness that often lay just beyond the village edge. It brings with it the rustle of unseen creatures in the thatch above your head, the mournful hoot of an owl that local lore might insist is more than just a bird, or the sudden creak of a floorboard that could be the old house settling, or something else entirely. The silence of the countryside, too, was different, deeper, punctuated only by the wind sighing through the trees, the distant bark of a dog, or the unsettling quiet that could fall before a storm. A quiet that allowed the imagination to flourish. In this world, the veil between the known and the unknown was perilously thin, almost translucent. Every unexplained ache, every curdled pail of milk, every sudden, violent hailstorm wasn't merely misfortune to be endured. It was a question mark, a potential sign, a chilling whisper from that other, unseen world that brushed so very close to this one. The village herbalist, with her strange-smelling concoctions and murmured chants, trod a very fine, precarious line between trusted healer and something far more sinister in the watchful eyes of her neighbors. This gentle, pervasive uncertainty, this constant awareness of unseen forces, formed the fertile, shadowy ground upon which suspicion, once planted, could grow with truly terrifying speed. But let's step away from that chilling thought for just a moment, and picture your own existence nestled within this very world. Imagine you stir from sleep, not to the jolt of an alarm, but to the gradual lightening of the sky, a pale gray seeping through the imperfect joins of your wattle and daub hut. The air inside is cool, thick with the lingering scent of wood smoke from last night's meager fire, and perhaps the earthy aroma of damp soil beneath your straw pallet. Your bed, a simple collection of dried grasses or bracken, rustles softly as you sit up, every muscle already anticipating the familiar demands of the day. You might stretch, feeling the cool, rough-hewn wood of the single room against your back, your eyes adjusting to the dimness. Outside, the world is waking slowly. Perhaps the first tentative chirps of birdsong reach your ears, or the distant, muffled lowing of a neighbor's cow. The day ahead promises toil. Certainly, long hours spent coaxing life from the stubborn soil, mending fences that always seem to sag, or tending to the few animals that mean the difference between a gnawing hunger and simple survival. It's a life etched in the lines on your hands, a rhythm as old as the hills surrounding your small, huddled village. There's a certain stark comfort in this predictability, in the known cycle of seasons and the shared, often unspoken, burdens of your small community. The sun, when it finally climbs high enough to send a shaft of dusty, golden light through a crack in the wall, feels like an old, reliable friend. This simple life, with its earthy smells and the solid, reassuring feel of the land beneath your bare feet, is all you've ever known. And for now, in these quiet, pre-dawn moments, it feels secure. A fragile security, perhaps, given the shadows we've just been discussing, but security nonetheless. That fragile security, however, is as fleeting as the morning mist clinging to the thatch of your roof. As the sun truly asserts itself, painting the inside of your small, smoky hut with its pale, searching light, the day begins, and with it, the unending rhythm of labor. Imagine your hands, already rough, perhaps chapped and calloused like old leather, gripping the worn, splintered handle of a hoe, or the cool, damp wood of a heavy water bucket hauled from a distant, muddy stream. There's no gentle easing into the morning with a warm drink. The fields, stretching out under a vast and often indifferent sky, demand your immediate attention. The air, thick with the smell of damp earth, the faint, sweet scent of livestock, and perhaps the distant, acrid tang of wood smoke from a neighbor's struggling hearth, fills your lungs. You'd spend hours out there, planting tiny seeds in hope, weeding relentlessly under a baking sun, or harvesting meager crops with an aching back, each task dictated by the turning season. Each movement is familiar, repeated countless times, your muscles burning with a dull, persistent ache that you've learned to accept as a constant companion. Resilience isn't a virtue you cultivate with thoughtful intention. It's simply the texture of your existence, as ingrained as the stubborn dirt beneath your fingernails. This life, utterly dependent on the whims of nature, a sudden devastating hailstorm, a prolonged drought that cracks the earth, or a biting unseasonal frost, is a constant, quiet negotiation, fought with weary grit and a deep, almost instinctual knowledge of the land. The sun might be your friend one moment, a tyrant the next. This relentless cycle, this intimate, often harsh, dance with the elements, forms the very bedrock of your world. A world where every drop of sweat is a prayer for survival, long before any other shadow falls. Beyond the demanding fields, your world shrinks to the familiar, almost suffocating, embrace of your village. Picture it now. As the light begins to fade, a cluster of timber-framed homes, their thatched roofs huddled close, like old friends sharing secrets against the evening chill. Smoke, a pale gray ribbon, curls lazily from chimneys, carrying the faint, comforting scent of wood fires and, if you're lucky, baking bread, mingling with the ever-present, earthy aroma of livestock and damp soil. Here, every face is known, every family tree recited like a well-loved, oft-repeated prayer. A comforting thought, isn't it? To be so thoroughly enmeshed in a community, a web of shared lives and mutual support. When a roof needs mending or a harvest brought in quickly, hands will appear, calloused and willing. But this intimacy, this deep-seated knowing, has another edge, as sharp and unseen as a shard of ice hidden in winter straw. Every glance exchanged across the muddy track, every quiet word spoken by the well, is noted, catalogued. Your habits, your moods, even the herbs you gather from the hedgerow or the way you stir your thin pottage, it's all observed, commented upon, filed away in the vast unwritten ledger of the village memory. There are no truly private sorrows here, no truly hidden joys. Each ripple of your life spreads outwards. And in a place where life is so precarious, where unexplained misfortunes like a suddenly blighted crop or a colicky infant can stir profound anxieties, this constant, unwavering scrutiny can easily curdle. Benign eccentricities, a solitary walk, a knack for healing, might begin to look like suspicious signs. A whispered rumor, perhaps born of petty jealousy or simple misunderstanding, can take root in this fertile ground of shared knowledge, festering quietly, like an unseen wound, long before it ever breaks the surface. Imagine, for a moment, breathing air that hums with unseen energies. This isn't just a world of wood, stone, and toil. It's a place where the veil between worlds feels exquisitely thin, almost translucent. Every creak of the floorboards at night, every sudden gust of wind that rattles the shutters, every shadow that dances in the flickering candlelight isn't merely an occurrence. It's a potential message, a sign, an omen. The wind itself might carry whispers, not just of air, but of spirits, both benevolent and otherwise passing by. In this world, God is not a distant deity, nor is the devil a mere concept. They are active, palpable forces, constantly vying for influence in the smallest details of your daily life. So when the milk sours unexpectedly, or a healthy calf suddenly sickens and dies, or a relentless cough settles in your chest, the first thought isn't always of natural causes. It's a troubling question mark, a whisper of why us, which quickly finds its answer in the realm of the supernatural. A paternoster might be muttered for protection, a warding gesture made. The very texture of existence feels different. The rustle of leaves in the forest might be the passing of a nature spirit. The unexpected chill in a warm room, a ghostly presence. A dream, vivid and unsettling, isn't just your mind at work. It could be a divine warning or a demonic temptation. This constant interpretation of the world, this deeply ingrained belief that potent forces are always at play, creates a landscape where suspicion, once planted, can grow with terrifying speed, its roots nourished by a pervasive, unshakable faith in the unseen. The air itself, thick with this unshakable faith, carries whispers on every breeze. Now picture this. You awaken one morning in your cramped, earth-floored cottage. The usual scent of damp straw and stale wood smoke is pierced by something else, something acrid and unsettling. You shuffle towards the rough-hewn table where the clay jug of milk sits, precious and vital for the day. But as you lift it, a faint, sour odor, sharp and unfamiliar, reaches your nose. The milk, usually a promise of sustenance, pours thin and curdled, a pale, lumpy liquid that turns your stomach slightly. This isn't merely a culinary disappointment, a minor inconvenience. In a world where every shadow might hold meaning, this is an aberration. Good, wholesome milk doesn't just spoil overnight without a guiding hand, a malevolent thought or an envious eye. The churning in your gut isn't just from the spoiled dairy. It's the cold dread of understanding that something or someone is amiss. Such a deviation from the norm, however small, demands an explanation. The crops in the next field might wither under a sudden blight, or a neighbor's child might fall into a fever that no poultice can cool. These aren't coincidences, they are signs. And in this tightly wound world, signs always point towards a cause, a source, and often a scapegoat. The question, unspoken but heavy, begins to form. Who willed this? That question, who willed this, doesn't linger in the air for long. Like a suffocating blanket, it settles, and the answer, it seems, is you. It often begins not with a thunderous denunciation, but with a murmur that gains an awful momentum, a sideways glance from a neighbor that hardens into a chilling stare. Then, the finger. Perhaps it's the trembling digit of Old Man Hemlock, still bitter about that fence dispute from last spring. His prize rooster now mysteriously lame and refusing to crow. Or maybe it's young Elara, her own meager turnip patch, blighted while yours, by some fluke of sun or soil, managed to survive the same harsh frosts, her eyes reflecting not just a neighbor's fear, but a green-tinged resentment. The finger, when it finally extends, feels less like flesh and bone and more like a sharpened icicle, aimed directly at your chest. It cuts through the familiar, smoky air of the village green, or the hushed, damp quiet of the churchyard, after an unexpected downpour. And it finds, points you. Suddenly, the mundane soundtrack of your existence, the distant, rhythmic thud of a woodsman's axe from the nearby copse, the lowing of cattle awaiting milking, the cheerful, oblivious shouts of children playing by the muddy stream. It all seems to recede, to drain away into an unnerving stillness. In its place, a focused, terrible silence descends, punctuated only by the quickening, frantic beat of your own heart, a trapped bird against your ribs. You feel the collective gaze, a physical weight, 1,000 unspoken accusations pressing down. The very air you breathe feels colder, thinner. This isn't merely a bad turn of luck. It's the silent, chilling click of a trap door opening slowly beneath your feet. That unnerving stillness doesn't last. It's pricked, then torn, by the faintest of sounds. A murmur. Perhaps it begins with Old Man Hemlock, whose prize piglet inexplicably sickened just days after you innocently admired it. Or maybe it's a shadow someone thought they saw lingering too long by your cottage window as the last sliver of moon disappeared. It doesn't really matter how the first seed is sown. What matters is the soil it lands in. Minds tilled by hardship, superstition, and the ever-present fear of the unknown. That murmur, soft as a moth's wing against a window pane at first, finds fertile ground. It travels from the overflowing water barrel at the well, where Goodwife Agnes nods gravely, adding her own remembered slight, to the smoky haze of the smithy, where even the rhythmic clang of the hammer seems to pause, listening. Each telling embellishes, each fearful ear magnifies. The herbs you gathered from the woods for a simple healing poultice, now whispered to be ingredients for a wicked, unholy curse. The stray black cat you occasionally fed scraps at your door? Suddenly, it's your familiar. A tiny demon in disguise. Its purrs a malevolent incantation. You might catch snatches of it. A poisoned dart of a word here. A fearful crossing of themselves there. As you attempt to go about your day, the air, once just air, now feels thick with this suspicion, clinging to you like damp, itchy wool. Faces that once offered a neighborly nod now turn away, eyes darting elsewhere, or worse, fixing on you with a new, dreadful understanding. Before the sun has even reached its zenith, the whisper has become a chorus, a grim pronouncement. What was, mere hours ago, perhaps just a fleeting, spiteful thought in one person's mind, has blossomed into a terrible, unshakable truth for the entire community. A truth that now defines you entirely. And as this terrible truth settles upon you, something inside, a core part of who you are, rebels. Your mind, trained by centuries of different thought, grasps for solid ground, for something comprehensible in this sudden, swirling mire of unreason. You can almost feel the gears whirring within your skull, desperately trying to align this new reality with everything you know. That spoiled batch of butter? Surely a warm day, a lapse in hygiene, nothing more sinister. The neighbor's child falling ill? A common fever, perhaps. A chill caught in the damp fields. You'd want to explain, wouldn't you? To lay out the facts as you see them, coolly, calmly. Perhaps you'd offer alternative, perfectly natural explanations for each supposed malfeasance, each curious coincidence. You might even try to deconstruct their fears, pointing out inconsistencies, appealing to what you believe is a shared sense of logic. You'd expect, perhaps, a flicker of understanding in their eyes, a hesitant nod, the slow, dawning light of reason. But this, right here, is your first and perhaps most critical misstep. In this world, your calm rationality isn't seen as innocence. It's perceived as cunning, a chillingly artful composure. Your logical arguments are not enlightenment, but clever deflections, the subtle weaving of a deceiver's tongue. Each attempt to apply your modern understanding, to impose order on what they see as supernatural chaos, only tightens the invisible net around you. Your insistence on a world governed by observable facts, by cause and effect, becomes, in their eyes, the most compelling evidence of your unnatural, dangerous detachment from the accepted truths that bind their community, their very existence, together. It's a profoundly unsettling realization. The very tools of your intellect, your precious reason, are now working against you. So your well-reasoned arguments, your pleas for logic, have fallen on deaf ears, or worse, ears attuned to a different, more sinister frequency. Now, the very fabric of your daily life, the small, unconscious acts, begin to unravel under their scrutiny. Think about it. An unguarded glance, held a second too long, perhaps at a neighbor's thriving cow when your own has gone dry. Was it simple observation or the casting of an envious, blighting eye? That muttered word of frustration when the bread failed to rise? A common annoyance? Or a whispered curse, potent enough to spoil the village's bake? The fear that permeates their world acts like a distorting mirror, reflecting back monstrous shapes from the most innocuous gestures. It's a fear fed by hardship, by the inexplicable cruelties of their existence. A failed crop, a child's sudden fever, the unsettling shadow in the woods. In their minds, such misfortunes rarely happen by chance. A malevolent will must be at play. If you were a woman who knew a little too much about herbs for healing, that knowledge easily sours into something more menacing. If you preferred the quiet company of your own thoughts to the raucous village alehouse, your solitude becomes suspect, a cloak for secret dealings. Even a birthmark, an old scar, or an unusually friendly stray cat could be twisted, seen not as a quirk of nature, but as a mark of the devil's favor, or familiar spirit in disguise. Every deviation from the norm, every quiet moment of difference, becomes another thread in the damning tapestry they are weaving around you, a tapestry colored by fear and long-held suspicions, woven tight with the whispers of neighbors and the cold dread of the unknown. And then, the moment arrives, perhaps not with a thunderclap, but with a quiet, dreadful finality. It might be in the damp chill of the village square, the morning mist still clinging to the rough-hewn timbers of the houses, the scent of wood smoke and damp earth heavy in the air. Or perhaps you're before the local reeve, His small, cluttered office, smelling faintly of old parchment, beeswax, and the faint metallic tang of ink. The words are spoken not necessarily in a dramatic shout, but often in a low, certain tone that cuts through the mundane sounds of the day sharper than any physical blade. Which, the sound of it, a sibilant hiss, almost a whisper, yet it hangs there vast and undeniable. Suddenly, the faces you've known your entire life. The baker whose flowery smile you've seen 1,000 times. The blacksmith whose booming laugh usually warmed the forge. Even the children you might have bounced on your knee. Transform. Eyes that once held simple warmth, or perhaps just neutral indifference, now glint with a chilling mixture of raw fear and a strange, almost hungry excitement. It's a look that strips you bare. The comfortable, familiar murmur of village life around you seems to dim, sucked into a vortex of focused, prickling silence. Each breath you take feels loud, conspicuous, a betrayal of your hammering heart. The very air, once familiar and life-giving, now feels heavy, thick, with their collective judgment pressing in. The rough-spun wool of your tunic suddenly feels abrasive against your skin, a stark contrast to the invisible, yet entirely palpable, wall that has just sprung up between you and everyone, and everything you once knew. There's no grand pronouncement yet, no immediate clatter of chains, just this awful, knowing stillness and the dawning, sickening realization that your world has irrevocably, terrifyingly changed. The silence stretches, thin and taut, like a thread about to snap. And so, you try. You have to. A tremor might run through your voice as you begin, the words tasting like ash in your dry mouth, but you speak them anyway. You deny it, naturally. You plead. Perhaps you even try to reason, your voice echoing a little too loudly in the oppressive quiet that has fallen. You look from one stony face to another, searching for a flicker of doubt, a glimmer of understanding, anything but this blank, unyielding certainty. But your carefully chosen words, the ones you hope will clear your name, seem to drift away, unheard, or worse, misinterpreted. Each syllable you utter in your defense is met not with relief, but with a deepening suspicion. They watch you, these familiar faces now hardened into masks of judgment, and in their eyes, your clarity isn't a sign of innocence. Oh no, if you speak too well, too calmly, if your arguments are too logical, then surely this is not your own mind at work. This composure, this unsettling ability to articulate under such dire pressure, well, that's the devil's work, isn't it? He's a cunning one, they'd murmur, lending his silver tongue to his chosen servants. Your desperate pleas for reason become whispers of dark collusion. The harder you try to explain, to untangle the misunderstanding, the more tightly the invisible net of accusation seems to draw around you. There's a cold, dawning horror as you realize that every word, every gesture of denial, only serves to paint you further into the corner they've already decided you occupy. The very tools you thought might save you, your voice, your reason, are now being twisted into proof of your guilt. And all you can do is feel that cold knot of dread tighten in your stomach as the last wisps of hope begin to fade into the stale, smoky air around you. Then, a new ripple, a subtle shift in the air, moves through the gathered villagers. Heads turn, not with the same frantic energy as before, but with a kind of hushed deference. Whispers die down, replaced by an expectant silence that feels heavier than any noise. A path clears, almost reverently, and into this space steps a figure of local standing. It might be the Reeve, his face weathered like old leather, his hands calloused from work, but also from wielding the simple authority of the manor court. He carries the weight of the Lord's justice, however roughly that justice might be applied in these remote corners. Or perhaps it's the village priest, his dark homespun robes a stark, sober contrast to the earthy tones of the crowd, his presence a looming reminder of God's judgment, and a judgment far more immediate and tangible than any you'd contemplated in sleepy Sunday sermons. Sometimes it was the village elder, a man whose wisdom was sought for planting seasons and mending fences, now turned to for discerning matters of profound, unseen darkness. Their arrival doesn't just quiet the crowd, it seems to solidify the very air around you, making it harder to breathe. These aren't just your neighbors anymore, fueled by sudden panic, local gossip, and perhaps a touch of bitter envy. This is authority, embodied and recognized, solid and unyielding. Their eyes, whether typically kind or habitually stern in ordinary times, now hold a different, more focused glint, the burden of decision, the shadow of communal responsibility, or perhaps just the grim, quiet satisfaction of wielding power in a world that offers little of it. You feel their gaze, heavy as a millstone, pressing down on you, examining every flicker of your expression. Every muttered word from the onlookers, every fearful glance, seems to gain an undeniable legitimacy simply because they are now listening, their quiet contemplation more damning than any shout. Their very presence validates the whispers, transforms flimsy suspicion into something chillingly formal, something that now has a name and a procedure. The hope you clung to, that fragile wisp, feels even thinner now, a thread about to snap under the immense, unseen weight of their established word, their trusted position. Imagine the air, thick with unspoken fear. The moment a gnarled finger points your way, and a single chilling word, "Witch," slices through the usual village hum. It's not a court of law as you might picture it, no polished wood or stern, bewigged judge weighing evidence. Instead, it could be the muddy village green, spectators pressing close, or perhaps a hastily convened gathering in a cold, drafty barn, the scent of damp earth and fear mingling. The faces you've known your whole life, the ones you shared thin, watery ale with or nodded to at the weekly market, now harden, morphing into masks of suspicion or outright terror. A chilling certainty settles in their eyes, because in this world, the accusation itself is a heavy, suffocating cloak of guilt thrown instantly over your shoulders. There's no comforting modern phrase like innocent until proven guilty to cling to. That concept, a distant dream of future justice, simply hasn't been born yet in this harsh reality. The burden, immense and terrifyingly immediate, falls squarely, crushingly upon you. How do you even begin to prove you didn't make the neighbor's prize sow miscarry, or conjure the sudden, unseasonal hailstorm that flattened young Master Thomas's precious barley crop? These are not crimes with clear, tangible evidence, but shadows given form, anxieties allowed to fester and bloom into damning, life-altering charges. The expectation isn't for your accuser to meticulously prove your guilt. It's for you to somehow, miraculously, prove your innocence against claims that often defy any logical rebuttal, claims born of fear and whispered in the dark. It's like being asked to prove you didn't commune with unseen spirits, an impossible, maddening task, with your life hanging precariously in the balance. And so, with these spectral accusations hanging heavy in the air, a new kind of chill begins to settle around you, one far colder than any winter wind. It starts subtly. The friendly nod from Old Man Hemlock as you pass his cottage? Gone. Now his eyes, once crinkled with shared jokes about the weather or the price of ale, seem to fixate intently on a distant tree, or perhaps the mud beneath his boots, anywhere but your face. The cheerful chatter of women at the village well, a sound as familiar as birdsong, now hushes abruptly as you approach with your wooden bucket. Conversations, once open and flowing, become clipped whispers that cease entirely when you draw near, leaving only the rustle of their skirts as they edge away. You feel it, don't you? That invisible wall, hastily erected around your very being. Each averted gaze is a tiny hammer blow against your spirit. Each hurried step away from you on the narrow village path, a fresh stab of isolation. These are people you've known your whole life, individuals with whom you've shared meager bread, celebrated meager harvests, and mourned shared losses in the damp churchyard. Now their faces are closed masks, their backs frequently, pointedly, turned. It's not necessarily overt hatred you see in the fleeting sideways glances you do manage to catch, though perhaps there's a flicker of that too, born of this new, terrifying narrative. More potent and more chillingly palpable is the raw, naked fear radiating from them. They're terrified, you see. Terrified that even a kind word exchanged, a shared glance held too long, might somehow link them to your alleged darkness, might draw the baleful eye of suspicion towards their own hearth and home. In a world where misfortune is so readily attributed to unseen malice, and malice to the whispers of witchcraft, proximity to the accused is like standing too close to a house consumed by an unseen, spiritual fire. They are simply trying to protect themselves, their own families, from those consuming invisible flames. But their desperate self-preservation becomes your profound, soul-crushing solitude. A silence that screams louder than any accusation. That screaming silence follows you, a heavy cloak of dread, as you are guided, perhaps not so gently, onto the village green. The familiar patch of grass, where children might usually chase geese and lovers steal glances, is now an arena. There are no cheering crowds, only a hushed, expectant ring of faces. Your neighbors, the people you've known your whole life. Their expressions are an unsettling mix, some openly hostile, others merely curious, a few betraying a flicker of pity, quickly suppressed. This isn't a court, not yet. This is something rawer, more primal, a public dissection of your character, your composure. Imagine standing there, the damp earth beneath your worn shoes, the collective gaze pressing in like a physical weight. A respected figure, maybe the local reeve or a stern-faced bailiff, begins the questioning. The words themselves might be deceptively simple, asking about your comings and goings, your acquaintances, any unusual remedies you might know. But the true test isn't in your answers. It's in how you deliver them. A tremor in your voice, a darting of your eyes, the nervous wringing of your hands. These are not seen as the understandable reactions of someone terrified and unjustly accused. Oh no. In this theater of suspicion, your fear is the star witness for the prosecution. Each faltering breath, each bead of sweat, is silently noted, tallied up as another piece of damning evidence. You're not just being questioned, you're being watched for the slightest crack, the smallest sign that the dark whispers about you might, in fact, be true. And as you stand there, your own body betraying you with its nervous tells, another chilling realization begins to dawn, settling like a cold mist. There's no kind-faced solicitor leaning in to whisper advice, no learned advocate ready to parse the dense legal arguments or challenge the flimsy accusations. No one steps forward to speak on your behalf, to untangle the web of suspicion that tightens with every passing moment. You are utterly, terrifyingly alone in navigating this strange, hostile environment. This isn't a court you recognize, not from any village dispute over a stray pig or a contested fence line that might be settled with familiar customs and community understanding. The language spoken by the magistrates, by your accusers, even by the scribbling clerks, feels heavy, formal, almost a foreign tongue. It's laden with theological pronouncements and legalistic terms you barely grasp, words that seem to carry the weight of judgment before any verdict is even considered. You are a solitary figure adrift in a storm of officialdom and suspicion, a tiny boat tossed on a hostile sea with no rudder and no map to guide you through this terrifying alien process. The silence where a friendly, guiding voice should be is perhaps the most deafening sound in the room, a vast, echoing emptiness that presses in on you. Each question, each accusation lands directly upon your shoulders, unfiltered, unsoftened, and often entirely unexplained. How are you to know what constitutes a trap? What is a genuine inquiry? How can you possibly navigate this labyrinth of fear and archaic procedure when you can barely understand the charges, let alone articulate a coherent defense against them? There is simply no one there to light your way. Beyond the cold stone walls of your confinement, or perhaps even pressing into the very room where you sit, a different kind of pressure begins to build, an unseen tide rising. It's a low hum at first, the indistinct murmur of many voices, the sound of collective anxiety. Imagine the rustle of a village holding its breath, the shuffling of feet on packed earth or cold flagstones. These are faces you might have known, individuals you passed in the dusty lane, perhaps shared a strained, fearful glance with at the market just days before. But now, their eyes hold a different, unsettling light. A raw flicker of fear, certainly, but also a desperate, almost hungry need for resolution. Their worries are a palpable thing in the air, as thick and cloying as the smoke from a damp fire. You can almost smell their fear, the acrid tang of nervous sweat, the stale breath of sleepless nights, the failed harvest that gnaws at their bellies, the relentless cough that swept through the cramped cottages, the unexplained shadow that fell across a perfectly healthy cow. These anxieties, sharp and personal, begin to coalesce. They weave together into a single, unspoken, yet overwhelmingly powerful demand. They need an answer, a reason for their suffering, and perhaps, just perhaps, a sacrifice to set things right. And the weight of this collective terror, this simmering, undirected anger, doesn't just buffet you, the accused, adrift in your own nightmare. It bears down heavily, insistently, on those who hold your fate in their hands. The local magistrates, the village priest, even the sternest professional accuser, they are not immune to this atmosphere. They breathe the same frightened air, hear the same fearful whispers that slither through the community after dusk. It's a potent force, this wave of communal panic. It whispers insidiously that a swift condemnation, a decisive, public end, might just calm the storm. It suggests that your guilt, confirmed and punished, could appease whatever dark forces they imagine are to blame. Their urgent need for your guilt becomes a powerful current, strong and insistent, pulling everyone, including your would-be judges, towards a predetermined and likely grim shore. So, there you are, caught in this terrifying tide of suspicion. The air itself seems to press in, heavy with the expectation of your confession, thick with unspoken fears. Now try to picture your modern self, your mind, accustomed to concepts of justice, of innocent until proven guilty, suddenly thrust onto this cold, unforgiving stage. Perhaps a spark of righteous indignation ignites within your chest, a familiar burn. You want to shout, to demand evidence, to assert your rights with the fierce conviction that a terrible, ludicrous mistake is being made. You might try to explain, clearly and rationally, why these accusations are absurd, pointing to the lack of tangible proof. But in this dim, fear-drenched world, where shadows dance and reason flickers like a dying candle, your impassioned plea for fairness lands very differently. That fiery spirit, which you see as a justified defense, is perceived by your grim-faced accusers as something far more sinister. Your articulate arguments, to their ears, already primed for the whisper of damnation, it might sound like cunning, a devilish glibness designed to deceive their pious judgment. Your insistence on your innocence, your refusal to meekly bow your head and accept their pronouncements, could easily be twisted into damning evidence of a defiant, unrepentant heart. They might nod knowingly to each other, seeing it as pride, that most dangerous of sins, or worse, the frantic, blasphemous babbling of a soul already claimed, a spirit actively resisting the light of God. Your every logical argument, your every desperate cry for reason, only serves to tighten the invisible noose of suspicion, drawing it ever closer around your weary neck. The last sliver of gray light finally bleeds from the tiny, barred window, or perhaps just from the crack under the rough-hewn door of whatever crude, cold space now confines you. The day, with its dizzying whirlwind of accusations and your increasingly futile protests, has dissolved into an oppressive, echoing darkness. Sleep, that sweet balm for a troubled mind, that blessed escape, refuses to even approach. Instead, your thoughts churn endlessly, a bitter, indigestible stew of fear, bewilderment, and a rising tide of despair. You might find yourself lying on a bed of damp, musty straw, the sharp stalks pricking at your skin through thin clothes, offering no real comfort, only a constant reminder of your squalid predicament. The relentless chill of the stone floor, or the packed earth beneath, seeps slowly, inexorably, into your very bones. Every small sound in the suffocating silence seems amplified, magnified into something monstrous. Is that the drip of water somewhere unseen, a monotonous torment? Or the furtive rustle of unseen creatures in the thatch above, perhaps a rat skittering boldly nearby, emboldened by your stillness? Your own ragged breath catches in your throat, loud in the stillness, a stark contrast to the quiet malice you feel pressing in from outside. The faces of your accusers, those familiar neighbors or stern-faced officials, swim in the darkness behind your eyelids, their expressions a chilling mixture of fear, self-righteousness, and perhaps even a grim, unsettling satisfaction. Their words, twisted and venomous, echo relentlessly in your ears. There's no one to plead with now, no friendly face to offer even a crumb of solace in this profound isolation. The dawning horror, cold and sharp, is not just of the accusations themselves, but of your utter, crushing powerlessness. Your life, it seems, is no longer your own to defend, your voice no longer truly heard. Just when the echo of those damning words seems to be the loudest torment, a new, quiet kind of dread materializes. It might be the following dawn, the weak light barely piercing the gloom of your cell, or perhaps days have slipped by, lost in a haze of fear and meager rations. A figure enters, not with the clamor of guards, but with a hushed, almost methodical air, their movements deliberate and unnervingly calm. This, you realize with a fresh stab of cold, could be the witch pricker, a grim specialist summoned to find the devil's own signature upon your very skin. They often carried a small, unassuming bag, and from it they might produce an array of long, slender needles, perhaps even a specially designed pricker, with a retractable point, all gleaming dully in the meager light filtering through a high, grimy window. Imagine the profound chill, not just of the damp air, but of the violation, as your already coarse and uncomfortable clothes are roughly pulled aside. The pricker's gaze, detached and unsettlingly clinical, roams over your exposed body, scrutinizing every freckle, every mole, every old scar, each a potential candidate for condemnation. They are hunting for the asterisk stigma, diabolicum, the devil's mark, a spot they fervently believe is insensitive to pain, a supposed telltale sign that Satan himself has claimed you. The cold, sharp point of their instrument presses against your skin, again, and then again. A flinch from the unexpected prick, a cry of pain, or a stoic silence born of terror. In their predetermined narrative, either reaction or lack thereof could be twisted against you, sealing your fate with a tiny, almost invisible puncture. The search, however, rarely concludes with just the pricker's cold needle. Now, try to feel the damp, biting air of the cell, or perhaps a hastily cleared, shadowed room in the village hall, clinging to your bare skin like a shroud. Your simple, coarse-spun clothes lie in a heap on the dusty floor, and you stand utterly exposed. Not just to the chill that seeps from the stone walls, but to the probing, unwavering gazes of strangers. Perhaps the local midwife, her face stern and unreadable, the village elder, his eyes narrowed with suspicion, or even the very neighbors who might have shared a nervous laugh with you only weeks before. Their faces now are a stark mixture of grim determination and a strange, almost fervent curiosity. Every inch of your body becomes a subject for their intense scrutiny. Imagine rough, unsympathetic hands, perhaps calloused from fieldwork or softened by disuse, turning you, examining you, with a clinical detachment that feels far more violating than outright malice. They are hunting for anything remotely out of the ordinary. A prominent birthmark, an innocuous wart you've had since childhood, an old puckered scar from a forgotten fall. Each tiny imperfection, once just a familiar part of your own skin's landscape, is now reframed, twisted by their fear into a potential sigil of demonic allegiance, a physical testament to a pact you never made. You might hear their hushed, sibilant murmurs, the rustle of their clothing, perhaps snippets of misremembered Latin, or simply the crude, whispered assessments of your form, each syllable a fresh shard of ice against your already frayed nerves. There is no modesty permitted here, no shred of dignity afforded. You are less a person and more an object, a canvas upon which they are desperate to paint their darkest convictions. The profound, quiet humiliation of it all settles deep within your bones, a cold, heavy dread that might feel far worse than any fleeting physical discomfort. The air grows thick with their searching gazes, each pair of eyes a cold point of scrutiny on your exposed skin. They are hunting for something specific, a physical sign of your alleged communion with dark forces. This, they believe with chilling certainty, is the devil's seal, the infamous witch's mark, a spot where Satan himself has supposedly branded you, or where your imp familiar, a creature of pure malice, supposedly sups. And what constitutes such damning evidence, you might wonder, as their fingers, perhaps rough and calloused, prod and probe. Often, it's nothing more than a tiny, raised mole you've had since childhood, a slight discoloration of the skin you barely noticed, a forgotten scar from a clumsy fall, or even just an ordinary freckle. Suddenly, these innocent, unremarkable features take on a sinister new significance, twisted by fear and fervent superstition. Then comes the test, a moment of dreadful, almost performative theater. A long pin is produced, perhaps glinting dully in the poor light of the cell. Sometimes it's genuinely sharp, a cruel prod against your already tormented flesh, a jolt of pain that might elicit a cry they'd twist as further proof. But very often the needle is cleverly blunted, or it's a trick device with a point that retracts silently into the handle. When this is pressed with theatrical force against the suspected mark, it merely dimples your skin, causing little true pain or none at all. "See?" the witchfinder might exclaim triumphantly to the watching eyes. "She feels nothing. Proof positive of her unholy alliance." The crowd murmurs, convinced by this grim, deceptive pantomime. A lifetime of ordinary blemishes, now reinterpreted by others as irrefutable gateways to damnation. And so a perfectly natural part of your own body becomes the undeniable evidence of your guilt. A quiet tragedy written on your skin. And as you stand there, that pronouncement still echoing in the heavy air, a desperate urge might bubble up within you. You, a visitor from a future they couldn't possibly comprehend, know the truth of these skin-deep signs. You understand the mundane science behind a stubborn mole, the harmless nature of a birthmark, or the itchy reality of eczema. Perhaps you'd try to explain, to bridge the chasm of centuries with calm, rational words. You might speak of melanin, of benign dermatological conditions, of simple biology, but your careful explanations, so clear and logical in your own mind, would likely meet only bewildered stares or, worse, hardened suspicion. To ears primed for the whispers of devils and the incantations of dark magic, your scientific lexicon would sound like nothing more than a cunning new form of trickery, a confusing babble designed to deflect and deceive. "She speaks in strange tongues," someone might mutter, recoiling slightly, a sure sign of her unholy craft. The more you insist on the biological, the mundane, the more you might seem to be weaving a complex spell of denial. Imagine their faces, lit by flickering torchlight or the flat gray light of a grim afternoon, as you attempt to describe sebaceous glands or allergic reactions. Your 21st century knowledge, a source of comfort and understanding in your own time, becomes a leaden weight here, dragging you further into the depths of their fear. Each factual correction you offer, each attempt to educate, would simply be twisted into further proof of your unnatural power, your ability to confound the righteous. It's a quiet, chilling realization. Your very sanity, your grasp of the observable world, is now evidence against you. Your protests, your rational explanations fade into the oppressive silence of your new reality. Soon, you are no longer in the village square, facing accusing eyes, but somewhere smaller, darker. Imagine the dull thud of a heavy wooden door closing, sealing you into a space not meant for human comfort, let alone humane detainment. Perhaps it's a forgotten root cellar, the air thick with the cloying sweetness of damp earth, and the faint, ghostly scent of last autumn's forgotten harvests, now slowly returning to the soil. Or maybe you're in a disused animal pen, hastily cleared, the lingering ammonia tang of livestock mingling unpleasantly with your own rising fear. The floor, likely cold-packed earth or uneven, splintery planks, offers no solace as you shift uncomfortably. Try to stretch out, and you'll feel the damp begin to seep into your simple clothes, a persistent, gnawing chill that works its way past fabric and skin, settling deep into your very bones. Your fingers might tentatively explore the rough walls and the near-total blackness. Slimy, cold stone perhaps, or damp, faintly mossy wood, each unseen texture a stark reminder of your wretched isolation. Light becomes a distant memory, or at best, a teasing, inadequate sliver under a poorly fitting door, doing little more than accentuating the oppressive, velvety gloom that presses in from all sides. The silence, when it finally comes, is profound, broken only by the rhythmic drip, drip, drip of moisture from an unseen crack, or the faint, unsettling rustle of unseen things sharing your confinement. A mouse in the thatch, perhaps, or something less definable, scurrying in the darkness. This isn't a prison in any structured sense. It's an antechamber to despair. Every element, whether by deliberate design or simple, brutal neglect, is calibrated to unmoor you. The constant damp, the encroaching hunger that will soon begin to twist in your belly, the sheer sensory deprivation. These are the first, silent interrogators. They work to soften your resolve, to make the thought of saying anything, to escape the gnawing cold and the terrifying dark seem like a welcome release. Your mind, starved of stimulus, might begin to play tricks, and the hours blur into a single, miserable, timeless stretch, preparing you for whatever comes next. And so, the preparation continues, though preparation feels too kind a word for this slow, deliberate dismantling of you. The darkness isn't merely an absence of light. It's a presence, thick and cloying, pressing in from all sides. At first, your eyes might strain, searching for any crack, any sliver of the world outside, but soon they'll surrender, and the blackness becomes absolute, a velvet void where shapes swim only in your mind's eye, phantoms flickering at the edges of perception. Then come the sounds, or perhaps the profound silence that allows the smallest noises to become monstrous. A constant, rhythmic drip of water somewhere nearby, plink, plink, plink. Each drop a tiny hammer against your fraying nerves, a maddening metronome counting down the moments of your solitude. Is that the rustle of straw under your thin blanket? Or something else? A rat, perhaps, a fellow prisoner of the shadows, its tiny claws skittering across the unseen stone. Soon, you might not be sure what's real and what's a phantom conjured by a mind desperate for any stimulus, any break in the monochrome silence. This relentless assault on your senses, or rather, the starving of them, begins its insidious work. The unchanging dampness that seeps into your clothes and bones, the unyielding darkness, the repetitive, small sounds. They aren't just uncomfortable, they are tools. They pry open the cracks in your resolve, eroding your connection to the world you knew, the world of sunlight and birdsong. Sanity, after all, often anchors itself to the familiar, the predictable. Here, there is only the unpredictable rustle in the corner, the endless drip, and the crushing weight of the unseen. Your own body becomes a source of alien sounds, the too loud thump of your heart in your ears, the rasp of your own breath echoing slightly in the confines of the cell. The world shrinks to these cold, damp walls, and within this tiny, suffocating space, your mind, deprived of its usual anchors, starts to drift. It's a subtle erosion, this loss of self, a quiet fading at the edges, making you more pliable, more susceptible to suggestion, when human voices, and their terrible demands, finally return. The silence eventually is broken not by the anticipated voices, but by the dull scraping sound of something pushed across the stone floor, or perhaps a clank as a wooden bowl is set down just outside your reach. Sustenance. Or at least, the grim, almost insulting approximation of it. You might receive a chunk of bread, so hard it feels like a forgotten stone, tasting faintly of mold and the damp earth it likely sat upon. Its texture is coarse, abrasive against your tongue. Perhaps a thin, watery gruel, lukewarm at best, served in a chipped wooden bowl, offering little comfort and even less nutrition. A few lonely grains swimming in a cloudy liquid. The water, if it comes, is often a murky offering in a dented tin cup, drawn from sources you'd rather not contemplate. It might carry the taste of grit between your teeth, or something vaguely metallic and unsettling that coats your palate. You consume it all, of course, slowly, because the gnawing emptiness in your belly and the parched sandpaper dryness in your throat are powerful, primal motivators, overriding any revulsion. Each swallow is a small, desperate act of self-preservation, even as you sense how inadequate this offering truly is. But this meager fare does little to fortify you. Instead, a profound weakness, cold and insidious, begins to settle deep within your bones, spreading through you like a chill. Your limbs feel heavy, unresponsive, each movement an act of immense will, as if wading through thick treacle. A persistent, dull ache might begin to throb behind your eyes, a counterpoint to the hollow ache in your stomach. And with this creeping physical decay, the once sharp edges of your thoughts begin to soften, to blur. Concentration becomes a slippery thing, elusive, and the will to resist, to hold on to your own narrative, your own truth, frays with each passing hour of deprivation. It's a careful, cruel dismantling, this slow starvation, designed to make the mind as pliable and yielding as the weakened body, preparing you for what comes next. As your body continues its slow surrender, and your thoughts drift like mist over a cold lake, any lingering expectation of kindness, any faint hope for a gentle hand, begins to dissolve. The concepts we now hold dear, like humane treatment or a prisoner's right to basic dignity, are simply not part of this world you've been thrust into. They are melodies from a future orchestra, unheard in this dark, echoing chamber of fear and accusation. These ideas are centuries from bloom, abstract notions in an age that values communal purity far above individual comfort, especially for someone under such a dark cloud of suspicion. Your suffering, the gnawing hunger we spoke of, the chill that settles deep within your bones from the damp, unyielding stone, these are not registered as reasons for concern by your captors. Instead, in the eyes of those around you, your distress might be interpreted quite differently. It could be seen as a righteous consequence, a visible sign of the wickedness they believe you harbor, or perhaps even the first flickers of a divine judgment already in motion within your very frame. There is no pity here, no gentle inquiry into your well-being, only the grim satisfaction of a narrative confirming itself through your visible decline. The air itself feels heavy with this unspoken consensus, thick with the scent of damp stone, perhaps old straw, and something akin to old, unyielding conviction. Any plea for comfort, a softer resting place than the hard, unforgiving floor, or even a moment of quiet respite from the gloom, would likely meet a wall of blank indifference, or worse, a subtle tightening of the lips that suggests your discomfort is noted and even expected. It's a chilling realization, this understanding that your physical being, your pain, your fear, is not only unimportant, but perhaps even welcomed, as part of the grim, inevitable process. You are a vessel for their beliefs, and your discomfort is merely a footnote in their righteous story. The chill from that stone floor mentioned before seeps deep into your bones, a constant, unwelcome companion. But even more pervasive than the physical cold is the profound, biting chill of isolation. Imagine it if you will. Days bleed into nights, marked only by the meager sliver of light, if any, that dares to creep through a crack or a high, barred window. There are no friendly faces here, no soft reassurances whispered in the gloom. Every creak of a distant door, every indecipherable shout from the world beyond your confines, only serves to underscore your utter, desolate aloneness. The silence in your small, damp space becomes a living thing, pressing in on you. It's broken only by the rhythmic drip of water somewhere nearby, perhaps the faint scuttling of unseen creatures in the straw, and the frantic, muffled beat of your own heart. The voices you do hear, if any, are not for you. They are the detached tones of your guards, the murmur of your accusers passing by, their words devoid of warmth, each syllable a tiny hammer blow against your dwindling spirit. In this crushing void, with no voice of comfort, no touch of kindness, hope begins to wither, much like a forgotten plant starved of sunlight in a dark, forgotten corner of a derelict house. It doesn't just fade, it shrivels, curls inward, until the very idea of a friendly gaze or a gentle word feels like a distant, impossible dream from another life entirely. This isn't a quick, dramatic unraveling. It's a slow, grinding erosion of the self. The person you were, the one with connections, with laughter, with a place, however humble, in the vibrant tapestry of village life, starts to feel like a phantom, a ghost even to yourself. And as you sit there, wrapped in this impenetrable cloak of solitude, the accusations leveled against you begin to echo louder in the quiet of your mind. Not necessarily because you begin to believe them, but because there's precious little else to fill the suffocating emptiness. The world outside your cell shrinks, and with it, the strength to fight what seems an inevitable, lonely path carved out by others. The silence in your makeshift cell, perhaps a damp, lightless storeroom or a forgotten corner of a barn, is broken only by the scratchings of unseen creatures and the distant, muffled sounds of a world that has already forgotten you. You might cling to a sliver of hope, a vague notion that surely there must be some mistake, some process to follow. But the concept of due process, that comforting modern blanket of rights and representation, is a dream from a future you'll never see. There's no lawyer to consult in hushed tones, no neatly typed list of charges to scrutinize. The very air you breathe feels alien, charged with a terrifying uncertainty. Imagine trying to navigate this nightmare. Who do you appeal to? The local priest, who perhaps initiated the whispers? The village elder, whose fear now outweighs any past kindness? The rules, if any exist, are unwritten, shifting like shadows on the wall, whispered in fear or malice. Each creak of a door, each approaching footstep, isn't a signal of potential aid, but a harbinger of more questions, more pressure, from individuals who might be your accusers, your jailers, and your judges, all rolled into one. This isn't a system you can understand or fight. It's a suffocating, bewildering current, pulling you further into the dark, and the sheer, stark helplessness of it all is a cold dread that seeps into your very bones, a chilling premonition of what is to come. The door creaks open again, not with the sound of potential freedom, but with the heavy, deliberate tread of authority. Into the dim, oppressive space step your interrogators. Perhaps it's the local magistrate, his face a roadmap of small-town worries and the weariness of his station, his fingers stained with ink. Or maybe a stern-faced clergyman, his dark robes absorbing what little light dares to enter, his eyes alight with a conviction that feels far removed from any concept of mercy. They don't bring solace, only a deeper shade of shadow to the already murky room. The air itself feels heavy, thick with the smell of old wood, damp stone, and the lingering, unsettling aroma of unwashed bodies and stale fear. The psychic residue of those who have sat in this very spot before you, facing similar questions. Their voices, when they begin, are not necessarily shouts, not yet. They are often low, insistent, a relentless drone that seems to seep into the very pores of the room. You might hear the rustle of paper, a quill scratching as notes are taken, each sound magnified in the tense silence. Questions are posed, not to uncover some elusive truth, but to meticulously guide you, to nudge you towards a pre-written narrative, a story they have already composed in their minds. Did you not feel a sudden chill when Goodwife Agnes passed? They might ask, their tone suggesting the answer is already known, a foregone conclusion. Were you not seen muttering by the well the night the cow sickened? Each word is a carefully placed stone, adding to the invisible wall they are methodically building around you, a wall of perceived, unshakable guilt. There is no space for your denial to breathe, no flicker of genuine curiosity in their eyes, only the patient, almost grim expectation of your eventual, inevitable confession. They already believe they know who you are, and this charade, this slow, suffocating dance of words, is merely a formality on the path to confirming it. And then the questions begin, not as queries seeking truth, but as delicately baited hooks. Imagine the air in that small, often damp room, thick with unspoken accusations and the faint, musty scent of old wood and fear. The voice of your questioner, perhaps surprisingly calm, almost gentle, might ask, "So tell us, when did you last meet the dark man in the woods?" It's not ni as jumps, you met him, you see, but ni as strokes 40 for la capson. The question assumes your guilt as a starting point, a settled matter, like asking about the weather on a particular day. Or perhaps it's, which of your neighbors did you decide to curse with the wasting sickness? The phrasing is so casual, so matter-of-fact, as if discussing your choice of herbs for a particularly potent stew. Your mind races, a flurry of panicked thoughts against the heavy silence that presses in. Deny it? "I have never met any dark man in the woods," you might stammer, your voice barely a whisper, feeling the cold dread seep into your bones. But a denial is just uncooperative. It's seen as defiance, the stubbornness of the truly guilty, or perhaps the devil himself giving you the strength to lie under their piercing gaze. Admit to being in the woods, perhaps gathering firewood or foraging for berries. Then you were there, at the supposed scene of your transgression, merely omitting the damning details they are so eager to hear. It's a neat trick, really, in a grim sort of way. If you confess to meeting this shadowy figure, well, there you have it, the case is closed. If you deny it too vehemently, you're clearly hiding something, your agitation a sure sign. If you hesitate, your eyes darting around the oppressive room, you're simply buying time to concoct a better lie. Your words, meant to defend, become the very threads they use to weave your shroud of condemnation. The questions aren't designed to uncover facts. They are tools to extract a pre-written narrative, one where your guilt is the only possible inevitable ending. Each syllable you utter simply tightens the net, drawing it closer. The silence that follows their pronouncements is heavy, thick like the damp air in this makeshift courtroom, probably a hastily cleared barn or the chilly back room of an inn. You can almost hear the gears of their minds grinding, not in search of truth, but for the neatest way to slot your every breath, every flicker of your eyelid, into their predetermined narrative of your wickedness. There's a chilling simplicity to their logic, a terrifyingly closed loop from which escape seems as fantastical as the charges themselves. Imagine, for a moment, you try to reason. You state, calmly as you can manage, with a heart hammering like a trapped bird, that you were miles away when the neighbor's cow supposedly went dry, that you've never danced naked under a full moon, nor consorted with any shadowy familiars. Their eyes, however, don't register your words as truth. Instead, they see defiance, a cunning refusal to admit the obvious. The more you deny, the more you seem to them like a cornered animal, bearing teeth not in innocence, but in feral guilt. And what if, worn down by fear, by the endless leading questions, by the sheer hopelessness pressing in on you like a physical weight, you confess to something small? Perhaps you once muttered a harmless old rhyme over a sick child, a folk remedy passed down through generations. In their eager hands, this tiny, desperate offering twists into damning proof. That harmless rhyme becomes a sinister incantation, your well-intentioned act, a clear pact with dark forces. There is no middle ground, no space for misunderstanding, only the yawning chasm of their certainty. Your pleas for logic, for common sense, simply echo back from the stone-faced conviction of your accusers. They are not seeking your version of events. They are merely waiting for your story to align with the one already written in their minds. The air grows colder, the shadows deeper. Reason, in this place, has no currency. It's a foreign language no one here understands, or perhaps no one wants to understand. And when your words have failed, when every denial simply tightens the knot of their suspicion, they turn to a quieter, more insidious tool. There are no sharp instruments here, not yet. Only the slow, relentless erosion of your mind, orchestrated by the absence of sleep. Imagine the first night, then the second, bleeding into a third day where the sun is just a rumor beyond these damp stone walls. The flickering candlelight in your small, cold cell begins to play tricks on your eyes. Shadows writhe in the corners, morphing into faces, into the very demons they accuse you of consorting with. Your eyelids feel like lead weights, each blink a monumental effort, yet true rest is denied. The floor is hard, the air thick with the smell of old fear and something faintly metallic, perhaps the damp chill of iron. Voices drift in and out. Are they real, or are they phantoms conjured by your starved senses? Questions, when they come, are a dull drone, their meaning slippery, hard to grasp. Your thoughts, once your own, become a murky swamp, a thick fog that dulls every edge of reason. Distinguishing memory from nightmare, reality from the whispers they plant in the fertile ground of your exhaustion, becomes an impossible task. The very framework of your will begins to creak, to splinter. You are no longer fighting their accusations. You are simply fighting to stay tethered to yourself, a battle you are almost certain to lose in this relentless waking dream. Perhaps you believe, even now, that your modern resilience, your 21st century understanding of psychology and self-awareness, would somehow see you through, that you could cling to logic, to reason, like a drowning sailor to a splinter of wood. But this is a different kind of pressure, a crushing, atmospheric weight of collective certainty that operates entirely outside the bounds of what you know. Their faith, unshakable and absolute, forms the very air you breathe in that damp, cold cell, the unyielding stone of the walls that press in on you. It's a force that seeks not just to break your body, but to meticulously dismantle your mind, piece by painstaking piece. Every word they speak, every accusatory stare, every pious murmur from the crowd that gathers, is designed to sever your connection to your own truth. Your protests, your carefully constructed arguments, your pleas for reason, they become hollow echoes in a chamber built of unwavering belief. Imagine trying to explain your innocence when their reality is divinely ordained, their accusations backed by a fervent, almost tangible conviction that you are an agent of pure evil, a tear in the sacred fabric of their world. The sheer, unyielding certainty you face is a slow-acting solvent, patiently dissolving your rational mind, so adept at navigating the complexities and nuances of your own time, finds no purchase here, no anchor. It's like trying to build a sturdy shelter on quicksand, where every foundation stone of certainty you once possessed sinks without a trace, swallowed by the mire of their unshakable worldview. Your sanity isn't merely tested, it's actively, deliberately unraveled, thread by slow, agonizing thread. And as your own sense of self frays, the whispers begin, or perhaps they are not whispers at all, but clear, chilling pronouncements. The threat of physical persuasion, of asterisk correction, hangs heavy in the air, thick as the stale, damp smell of ancient stone, and lingering fear within your confines. It's not a subtle hint, artfully veiled. It's a promise, often delivered with the calm, almost sorrowful assurance of someone who truly believes they are doing vital work, perhaps even saving your soul, even if the methods are regrettable. Then, you might be shown the tools. Imagine, if you can bear it for a moment, being led not to a grand courtroom, but perhaps to a smaller, colder chamber, the air within it still and heavy. Your eyes would adjust to the dim light, perhaps from a single, flickering tallow candle or a narrow, barred window. And there they would be. The rack, its thick wooden rollers and taut ropes looking almost deceptively simple, until you understand its awful geometry. The thumb screws, small, intricate devices of dulled or perhaps coldly polished metal, glinting faintly. Maybe the strappado's ropes, hanging ominously from a ceiling beam, or the heavy, uncompromising form of an iron boot, resting on a dusty table. There's rarely a dramatic reveal, no theatrical flourish from a hooded figure. Just the quiet, brutal efficiency of objects designed for one grim purpose: to inflict unbearable pain, to bypass the will and reach for a truth or any words that will satisfy. The sight alone, the cold, hard, irrefutable reality of these instruments, could curdle the resolve and silence any desperate protest of innocence still clinging to your tongue. Many a spirit, already eroded by accusation, isolation, and the ceaseless psychological pressure, would simply crumble at the silent, eloquent testimony of the torturer's workshop. The words of confession, any words they wished to hear, might suddenly seem a small, almost reasonable price to pay. But what if your spirit, however battered, still whispered a denial, a faint flicker of defiance against the encroaching darkness? What if the shadow of the rack alone did not break you, and the carefully chosen, honeyed yet menacing words of the Inquisitor found no purchase in your exhausted mind? Then the pretense of, quote, gentle persuasion, a rather chilling euphemism, might begin to fray at the edges, revealing the harder, colder resolve beneath. Should those initial, supposedly less forceful methods fail to unlock your tongue, the grim repertoire of pain had deeper, more visceral offerings. Imagine, for a moment, the rough chafe of hempen rope biting into your wrists, pulled taut, impossibly tight behind your back. Then, the sudden, upward lurch as you are hoisted from the unforgiving stone floor, your entire body weight hanging precariously, suspended only by your shoulder sockets. This was the strappado, a simple, almost crude, brutal mechanism, yet devastatingly effective. You'd feel the initial, agonizing stretch, a prelude to the sickening, hollow pop as joints dislocated, shoulders wrenched from their natural cradle with a blinding finality. The pain would be a white-hot sheet, searing through every thought, every resolve, leaving only the screaming desire for it to cease. The air in the chamber might feel suddenly colder, or perhaps you wouldn't notice it at all, lost in that inferno. Or perhaps the cold, unyielding metal of the thumbscrews would be introduced, a more intimate, almost surgical instrument of torment. These small, deceptively simple clamps, with their polished surfaces gleaming faintly in the dim light, would be applied to your fingers or thumbs. Slowly, methodically, the screw would be turned, increasing the pressure. Each meticulous rotation sent a fresh, blinding wave of agony crushing delicate bone and sensitive nerve with an excruciating, inescapable precision. It was a focused, insistent horror, designed to shatter the last vestiges of will, to make any word, any admission, seem a blessed relief, a tiny island in an ocean of escalating torment. In such moments, truth becomes a fragile, distant memory, a luxury few could afford to cling to. The air in the chamber grows heavy, thick, with the scent of stale fear and sweat. Yours, and perhaps the lingering ghost of those who came before. Each agonizing throb from your mangled fingers, a relentless drumbeat, is a fresh reminder that this isn't truly an inquiry. It's a grim performance, and you are being coerced into playing a very specific preordained role. The questions continue. Persistent, almost monotonous, but they aren't really questions searching for truth, are they? They are prompts, insistent nudges towards a narrative already written in their minds. Who did you see at the Sabbat? Who danced with the devil beside you under the pale moon? Their voices might even be strangely patient, deceptively gentle, as if explaining a simple, inevitable task to a particularly slow or reluctant child. This whole elaborate, cruel theater isn't about unearthing some hidden reality, some secret knowledge you possess. It's about them confirming their own convictions, their deepest anxieties. They already believe you are guilty. What they need from your broken spirit, your pain-addled mind, is the outward, audible sign of their correctness. A confession, however forced. A story that fits the grim shape of their fear. And then, crucially, the names. The names are the lifeblood of the hunt. They are the tendrils of the supposed conspiracy. The branches of the diseased tree. They are so desperate to fell. It doesn't much matter if you truly knew these people, or if they were merely faces glimpsed in the market square, or even names whispered by your tormentors in the preceding hours. What matters is that you speak them, feeding the pyre that will inevitably consume others, and ultimately, yourself. Resisting, clinging to your innocence only prolongs the torment, because the truth you hold is a currency they simply do not accept here. It has no value in this terrifying transaction, in this dark, echoing room, where only the expected answers bring a pause to the suffering. And so the names are offered, like tarnished coins to a grim ferryman. But it's not your spirit that truly cracks first, not always. It's the flesh, the simple, brutal reality of your own body. You might believe, in some quiet moment before this all began, that your will is iron, your resolve unbreakable. But iron can be heated, twisted, shattered. Your body, after all, is a vessel of sensation, and what they inflict is designed to overload every circuit, to scream so loudly that no other thought can exist. The promises you made to yourself, the truths you swore to uphold, they become distant whispers, drowned out by the roaring fire in your nerves, the searing irons, the crushing weight, or the slow, deliberate dislocation of a joint. Your own biology, your very instinct to survive, shifts its allegiance. It no longer cares for abstract notions like innocence. It cares only for cessation, for a moment's peace from the relentless, grinding agony that pulses with every beat of your heart. Your muscles tremble, not with defiance, but with sheer, overwhelming exhaustion and pain that eclipses all else, perhaps a bitter taste of bile rising in your throat. And in that desperate calculus, any word, any name, any story they feed you becomes a lifeline, a potential key to unlock the shackles of pain, even if just for a breath. The truth becomes whatever words will make them stop. It's a horrifying surrender, not of your beliefs perhaps, but of your control over what your mouth will utter when your body is screaming louder than your soul. What choice truly is left when your own physical form becomes the most persuasive argument for your guilt? And so the pain has done its work. Your voice, when it finally emerges, might sound utterly alien to your own ears. A dry, rasping whisper forced from a throat still tight with unshed tears and the phantom ache of screams. You find yourself repeating the words they've so carefully suggested, the lurid stories they've woven from fear and suspicion. Yes, you danced with the devil in the moonlit woods, the cold night air supposedly on your skin, though all you truly recall is the biting, damp chill of the dungeon floor. Yes, you soured the neighbor's milk, blighted the village crops, your spectral hands passing unseen over these misfortunes, even as your real hands are raw, trembling, and utterly human. Each syllable feels like a lead weight, dragging you further into this nightmare they've constructed. Somewhere nearby, a scribe's quill scratches against parchment, a relentless, tiny insect etching your doom with every stroke. The words themselves are fantastical, almost laughable if the situation weren't so dire. Flying on a broomstick, or perhaps a goat, consorting with imps, whispering curses to the indifferent moon. It's a tapestry of pure fear and age-old folklore, now draped over your exhausted, broken form. But these are now your words, meticulously recorded, perhaps even witnessed. It's a grotesque parody of truth, this confession, born not from any genuine admission, but from the simple, overwhelming animal need for the agony to finally cease. This narrative of impossible spectral acts, once just whispers in the dark, becomes more real, more solid in their records, than the aching, undeniable reality of your tortured body. It's a story of their meticulous making, now signed in the invisible ink of your suffering. And with that final whispered lie, a strange, hollow quiet might descend. The storm of interrogation passes, leaving behind only the chilling, resigned calm of an accepted and sealed fate. That chilling calm, though, is a fragile thing, easily shattered by the next act in this grim play. For even with a confession wrung from your exhausted frame, the performance of justice, however distorted, must continue. And here, in this hushed, oppressive space, perhaps the air thick with the scent of old fear and damp stone, you'd confront one of its most bewildering and damning inventions, spectral evidence. Picture it. A figure steps forward, perhaps a neighbor you once shared a curt nod with, or a stranger whose face is a blur of pious accusation. Their voice may be laced with a chilling, genuine certainty, or a practiced tremor that sends shivers down the spines of the onlookers. Doesn't point to asterisk you, not your physical, aching self. No, they accuse your specter, your spirit, they'd insist, with eyes wide and breath held, detached itself from your sleeping form. It glided, they'd say, unseen and malevolent, into their home, into their very bedchambers to torment them. A pinch here, a suffocating pressure there, a whispered, unholy suggestion that curdled their dreams. And how, in this shadowy theater of belief, could you possibly refute such a thing? How do you prove your soul, your innermost essence, was quietly at rest, perhaps idly dreaming of a fuller belly or a moment's peace, and not out engaging in nocturnal misdeeds? You cannot summon your spirit as a witness to its own innocence. There is no alibi for an apparition. Their vivid testimony, born of fear or malice or delusion, becomes a tangible weapon. The magistrates, their faces etched with the grim conviction of an age that saw devils in every shadow, would listen intently, nodding slowly. This ghost story, told as gospel, carries more weight than your desperate silent plea. The invisible has been made visible, and it condemns you utterly. And sometimes, the ones painting these spectral portraits of your supposed guilt are the smallest voices in the room, their pronouncements echoing with an unnerving clarity in the hushed, tense space. Imagine a child, perhaps no taller than the magistrate's imposing dark-wood bench, their eyes wide, not necessarily with malice, but with the potent brew of fear, suggestion, and the wild, untamed landscapes of a young imagination. Their little hands might twist in the fabric of a rough-spun, homespun tunic, the scent of wood smoke and damp wool clinging to them, as they recount seeing you consort with shadows, or murmur incantations to the pale, indifferent moon. These are details perhaps whispered into their ear by anxious parents, or hammered home by a zealous preacher whose voice boomed with certainty. The air in the makeshift courtroom, likely a drafty church hall smelling faintly of old incense and fear, or a grim gray stone building where the chill seeps from the very walls, grows heavy with their piping words. Each syllable, however fantastical, however clearly a product of a child's overactive mind or a parroted lesson, is treated with a chilling gravity by the stern-faced inquisitors. There's a peculiar, unsettling earnestness to a child's accusation, a perceived purity that your desperate adult protestations struggle to pierce. Their stories, woven from half-heard whispers and half-remembered nightmares, become solid, unyielding threads in the rope that slowly, inexorably tightens around your fate. It's a terribly fragile, almost ethereal foundation upon which to build a death sentence, yet in these shadowed, fearful times, a child's fantasy could, and often did, become a peasant's funeral dirge. The sheer, unshakable weight of their innocent pronouncements, often delivered with a quavering voice that barely carries, could be utterly, silently crushing. So the whispers have solidified, the accusations have stuck, perhaps based on nothing more substantial than a child's fearful fancy or a neighbor's petty grudge. You find yourself far beyond the quiet halls of reasoned defense, thrust instead into the raw, unpredictable theater of an ordeal. They'd call it divine judgment, a way for God to make the truth known. Picture this, if you will. You are led, stumbling perhaps, your hands bound so tightly the rough rope bites cruelly into your skin, towards the local river or the still, murky surface of the village pond. The water itself looks cold, unwelcoming, reflecting a bruised and indifferent sky. The air might carry the scent of damp earth, of algae, and the almost metallic tang of fear. Mostly your own. This is where you'll face the infamous swimming test, or judicium aquae frigidae asterisk. The logic, whispered with solemn conviction by the stern-faced priest or the eager accusers among the onlookers, is terribly simple and utterly chilling. Pure water, considered a sacred element, blessed and inherently good, would naturally reject a servant of the devil, someone tainted by witchcraft. So if you float, bobbing helplessly upon its surface, perhaps your clothes trapping air, you are deemed undeniably guilty. Your supposed compact with darkness is confirmed for all to see, and a grim murmur, perhaps even a subdued cheer, might ripple through the assembled crowd, their fears momentarily assuaged by your condemnation. But what if you sink? What if the cold, murky water accepts you, pulling you down into its silent, chilling embrace, your heavy, sodden clothes becoming a leaden shroud, dragging you under? Well then, congratulations. In that terrifying, oxygen-starved moment, you're declared innocent. The sacred water has vouched for your purity. The only rather significant problem is that you're also quite possibly drowned, or at best, hauled out blue-lipped and sputtering, shivering uncontrollably, if you're fortunate enough to be retrieved before your lungs fill completely with the very element that proclaimed your blamelessness. It's a truly diabolical catch-22. A desperate gamble where even winning often meant a terrifying gasping brush with death. Your fate rests not on truth or evidence, but on the arbitrary physics of your body and water, the unseen currents, or even how tightly your captors ensured your bonds were tied. A terrifying performance, really, with only one guaranteed outcome: suffering. And even if you somehow endured that terrifying ordeal, hauled out gasping or with flesh still sizzling, the true challenge to your modern sanity was only just beginning. Imagine for a moment, standing before them, your accusers, the local magistrate, perhaps a crowd whose faces are a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. You try to explain in calm, measured tones the concept of bias, or the unreliability of hearsay, or even the simple physics that might cause someone to float or sink irrespective of their soul's purity. Your words, so clear and reasonable to you, would drift into the dim, smoky air of the room and simply evaporate. It would be like passionately reciting advanced physics to a bewildered flock of sheep. They might blink, chew cud, but understanding? Not a chance. Their eyes, narrowed in suspicion, would see your logical arguments not as a defense, but as further proof of your unnatural cunning, your glib tongue perhaps powered by the very darkness they feared. Listen to its smooth lies, one might mutter to another, the sound rustling like dry leaves. The devil grants a silver tongue. Your attempts at rational discourse would be met with blank stares, or worse, twisted into evidence of a mind too clever, too different, to be anything but malevolent. It's a profoundly isolating thought, isn't it? To possess reason in a world that has declared war on it. And so, with reason dismissed, the so-called evidence begins its grim assembly, piece by dreadful piece. Soon, after days, perhaps weeks, in a damp, lightless cell where the air hangs heavy with the scent of old stone and despair, a confession might be extracted. It wouldn't be your truth, of course. It would be a story woven from exhaustion, from the hollow ache of hunger, and the creeping dread that whispers there is no other way out from the unending questions, the leading statements, the chilling certainty in your accuser's eyes. Just a few mumbled words, a broken admission to end the torment, would feel like a key, even if it unlocks a darker door. Then, the search for the witch's mark. Imagine rough hands, prodding and searching your skin for any blemish. A mole you've carried since childhood, a tiny scar from a forgotten fall, perhaps even a simple freckle. Under their suspicious gaze, it warps into something sinister, a supposed teat for a demonic familiar, an unholy sign. The cold dread as they point, murmuring with grim satisfaction, would be a fresh layer of ice around your heart, this tiny, innocent part of you, suddenly damning. And then there's the spectral testimony. A truly bewildering concept. Someone, maybe a neighbor with a grudge, or a child caught up in the village hysteria, claims your spirit, your ethereal double, appeared to them in the night. They might say your specter pinched them, or whispered temptations, or curdled the milk. You could have been miles away, locked in your cell or asleep in your own bed, but their dream, their vision, becomes irrefutable proof. It's a phantom crime, impossible to disprove, yet it carries the weight of solid fact. Each claim, however baseless, is another stone laid, building an insurmountable edifice of perceived guilt, until the truth of you is buried so deep, it might as well never have existed. And so, with this heavy mantle of perceived guilt, now firmly draped upon your shoulders, the day of your trial inevitably dawns. But don't picture a hushed, solemn courtroom, with learned judges meticulously weighing evidence. Oh no! What awaits is more akin to a village fair, albeit one with a grim singular attraction. You. The air itself feels thick, not just with the usual smells of damp earth and wood smoke from nearby hearths, but with a palpable tension, a collective holding of breath from the assembled crowd, their eyes fixed upon you. You'd stand there, perhaps in the open market square under a gray, indifferent sky, or within the dusty confines of a hastily cleared barn, the faces before you a shifting blur of fear, morbid curiosity, and fervent, self-righteous certainty. The murmur of voices, like a disturbed hive, rises and falls, punctuated by the sharp, confident tones of your accusers, now emboldened as they play to their eager audience. Each denunciation, each fantastical claim of sour milk or spectral visitations, is met with solemn nods and audible gasps, a disturbing symphony of communal agreement. This isn't an inquiry. It's a performance, a chilling ritual designed to affirm what everyone already knows to be true. The figures presiding, be they local magistrates clutching worn parchments, or stern-faced clergy whose pronouncements carry immense weight, are less impartial arbiters of justice, and more like stage managers, carefully guiding the narrative towards its preordained, tragic conclusion. Any attempt you might make to speak, to reason, to plead for your life, is often drowned out by the righteous clamor, or worse, twisted with cruel ingenuity into further proof of your malevolence. Your quiet dignity could be interpreted as stubborn defiance. Your tears, merely a witch's cunning trick. The very act of defending yourself becomes another thread in the tightening web they weave. The purpose here, you see, isn't to unearth truth, but to confirm widespread fear, to provide a visible, tangible focus for all the unspoken anxieties of the community. The failed crops, the sudden illness, the chilling sense of misfortune. This public theater serves to bind them together, their shared condemnation a perverse form of solidarity, and you are the unwilling centerpiece. And as you stand there, the centerpiece of this grim spectacle, don't for a moment imagine a room full of thoughtful individuals weighing evidence with detached reason. There's no panel of your neighbors, no jury of your peers, in any sense we'd recognize today. Forget any notion of a defense attorney or cross-examination designed to find truth. Instead, you face men of local standing, perhaps the village elder, his face a mask of weathered certainty, or the stern-faced priest, his eyes already condemning, or a traveling magistrate keen to make an example. Their faces are etched with conviction, not curiosity. These aren't investigators. They are confirmers of a pre-existing narrative. They breathe the same thick air of superstition as your accusers, an atmosphere often heavy with the scent of unwashed bodies, damp wool, and stale fear. The world for them is a tapestry woven with divine will and demonic interference, and witchcraft is a very real, very present, and utterly terrifying thread. Your pleas for logic, for reason, for simple fairness, simply don't register against the vivid, terrifying stories they've heard, or perhaps even stories they've told themselves to explain the inexplicable. Their minds are already furnished with the grim imagery of dark rituals and malevolent spells, of pacts made in shadowy woods. The question burning in their eyes is not, did witchcraft occur? That's a given. But rather, how did this witch, the one standing before us, enact her wickedness? Each word you utter is sifted not for truth, but for the telltale signs of demonic deceit they are already primed, and perhaps even eager, to find. It's a chilling, terribly lonely stage, and the script has already been written. The script has indeed been written, and now, the final act of this particular scene begins. The pronouncement. It arrives not with a thunderclap, but perhaps with a chilling quiet, a solemnity that feels all the more damning. Imagine the air in the room, already thick with suspicion and the scent of damp stone, seeming to congeal, growing colder still as a voice, heavy with authority, cuts through the strained silence. This voice, whether that of a stern magistrate or a zealous cleric, doesn't just outline your supposed crimes, it redefines your very being. The words themselves are like ancient weathered stones, each one carefully chosen and landing with a dreadful finality. You hear phrases dripping with condemnation, perhaps consort of darkness, heretic, an affront to God's divine order. It's not merely a legal judgment, it's a spiritual erasure. In their eyes, and with their words, they are not just removing you from the village, from the warmth of community, but severing you from grace, casting your soul into an imagined outer darkness. The faces watching you might reflect a grim satisfaction, a fear, or even a kind of pious sorrow, but rarely doubt. You are now officially beyond the pale, a contamination expunged. The weight of it is immense, a chilling pronouncement that echoes long after the speaker falls silent. This isn't just about earthly punishment anymore. This is about your immortal soul, declared forfeit by those who hold the power of both law and pulpit. There's a terrible finality in the air, a sense that a door has not just been closed, but locked and barred, leaving you utterly terrifyingly alone, not just in the eyes of man, but, as they would have you believe, in the eyes of God himself. And so, the sentence follows, as inevitable as the setting sun after such a pronouncement. It's almost always death, a grim punctuation mark, at the end of a short, terrifying chapter. The specific method, hanging or burning at the stake, might vary, but the intention is chillingly consistent. This isn't a quiet, private affair. Oh no, this is theater, a brutal public spectacle, designed to scrub the perceived stain of your alleged witchcraft from the very fabric of the community. A stain they believe you have spread with invisible, malevolent hands. Imagine, if you can bear it, the slow, final procession. The faces in the crowd blur into a tapestry of fear, morbid curiosity, and, perhaps, for some, a grim sort of satisfaction. These are your neighbors, the people you might have once shared a thin ale with, or nodded to across the muddy track, now gathered to witness your undoing. The air itself feels heavy, thick with a collective unspoken dread, and the scent of damp earth, perhaps soon to be disturbed. There's a stillness before the terrible act, a held breath across the assembled onlookers. If it's fire, the pyre is constructed with a grim, almost mundane efficiency. The smell of raw wood, perhaps a little damp and earthy, mingles with the less pleasant scent of the crowd itself. Unwashed bodies, nervous sweat, the faint, unsettling aroma of collective fear. The crackling flames, when they finally take hold and begin their hungry ascent, are meant to be a purifier, a cleansing fire to cauterize the wound you supposedly inflicted upon the village. For those watching, it's a visceral, terrifying sermon, a warning that echoes louder than any words from the pulpit. Your end is their stark, unforgettable lesson. etched in smoke and memory. As the flames begin their hungry dance, a terrible spectacle for the assembled, your own world has already narrowed to a suffocating, singular point. There are no comforting words whispered in your ear, no gentle hand offered in genuine solace. The priest, if one is even present beyond perfunctory duty, might intone prayers, but they sound distant, hollow, like words spoken underwater for someone else entirely in another life. Reason abandoned this place hours, perhaps days ago. Appeals now are just wasted breath, a fragile puff of air against a gathering, unstoppable storm. The coarse fibers of the rope bite into your wrists, a constant, dull ache. The rough wood of the pyre or the stake presses against your back, a final, uncaring embrace from the earth you're about to leave. Perhaps a profound chill settles deep in your bones, a cold that has nothing to do with the evening air and everything to do with the dawning, inescapable, terrifying truth of your end. Each distinct crackle of the kindling, each hushed murmur or jeer from the crowd, is a tick of a merciless clock counting down not to release, but to an oblivion you can scarcely imagine. There is only the waiting now, a vast, hollow, echoing dread that fills the space where hope once, however faintly, might have flickered. Your last thoughts are your own, unheard, unshared, as the first tendrils of smoke curl upwards, carrying the acrid promise of the heat that will soon begin its relentless, agonizing approach. The acrid promise fulfills itself, a ghost of warmth at first, then a hungry, biting heat that crawls up your legs, your bound arms. Through the thickening haze you see them, the villagers. 100, perhaps 200, faces turn towards you. They are a tapestry of human emotion, woven together by the spectacle of your passing. Some peer with wide, fearful eyes, children clutching their mother's skirts, their small faces pale. Others are harder to read, their expressions shuddered, perhaps by a grim satisfaction or a weary acceptance of this grim necessity. This is not just your death, it is their ritual, a stark, public cleansing. You might see a former friend, someone you shared a laugh with over a weak ale, now studiously avoiding your gaze, their discomfort, a small, sharp pain amidst the larger agony. The village priest might be chanting, his voice a low drone against the fire's growing roar, sanctifying the act, framing it as a victory over encroaching darkness. Each flicker of the flames that dance higher is a punctuation mark in a sermon delivered not with words, but with your suffering. For them, this is a necessary horror, a way to cauterize a wound they believe festers within their community. The smoke, now thick and choking, carries not just the scent of burning wood and something horrifically familiar, but also their collective fears, their superstitions, their desperate need for order in a harsh and unforgiving world. As the flames lick higher, obscuring the faces, blurring the world into an inferno, their shared experience binds them, even as yours ends in terrifying isolation. The spectacle will be recounted, a dark story to hush children and remind adults of the thin veil between their ordinary lives and the extraordinary terror of the accused. That terrifying isolation isn't just physical, a body condemned. It's profoundly intellectual, a chasm of understanding separating your mind from everyone around. All your hard-won knowledge, the intricate tapestry of science painstakingly woven over centuries, the carefully constructed principles of modern law, even your nuanced grasp of human psychology, these are currencies from a realm that simply does not yet exist for them. They become, in this alien landscape of belief, not your shield, but perhaps even further proof of your supposed dangerous otherness. Imagine, if you can, standing there, the scent of damp wool and human fear thick in the air, trying to explain. You might, in a desperate, quiet plea, speak of atmospheric pressure influencing the milk, not a witch's curse. Or of bacteria, unseen yet potent, causing the sudden fever, not a malevolent gaze from across the village green. You could attempt to articulate the concept of coincidence, of group suggestion, of the mind's strange shadowed pathways that lead to conviction without cause. But these explanations, so clear and rational to your 21st century understanding, would simply sound like arcane babble, the confused ramblings of guilt, or worse, the clever, twisting deceptions of a soul already forfeit. Your very insistence on a world governed by discoverable impersonal laws, rather than capricious spirits and divine wrath, would only deepen their suspicion, marking you as someone who does not share their fundamental, terrifying truths. These precious tools of reason, of science, of empathy as you understand it, offer no purchase here. They are blueprints for a future they cannot see, and you, tragically, will not reach. And so, your logical pleas, your 21st century explanations, simply evaporate into the stale air of their deeply held convictions. It's not a question of their intellect, but of the very architecture of their world, a mental landscape sculpted by forces you no longer recognize. Imagine their reality, not as a predictable machine of cause and effect, but as a vast, breathing forest, alive with unseen entities, where every rustling leaf might be a portent, every shadow a lurking malice. The air itself feels different here, thick with the unspoken, the potent possibility of enchantment and dread. In this world, a curdled pail of milk isn't a matter of bacteria. It's the sour breath of a witch's curse, a tangible evil left by an unseen hand, perhaps settling like a foul miasma in the cool of the dairy. A sudden, violent hailstorm that flattens the precious barley isn't a meteorological event, it's divine displeasure, or worse, the malevolent focused work of someone who has bartered their soul. The constant, gnawing fear of the inexplicable, the ever-present potential for supernatural intervention, is the very rhythm of their days, a baseline hum beneath the toil and the prayer. You, searching for a rational cause, are looking for a ghost in a machine they haven't even conceived of. Therefore, your inability to survive isn't merely about failing to say the right words under duress. It's about not possessing the fundamental map to their existence. You cannot navigate a terrain whose dangers are invisible to your modern eyes, whose sacred groves and cursed hollows are defined by a faith you do not share, by fears that feel ancient and unshakable. Each of your reasoned denials, your patient explanations of natural phenomena, would simply paint you as alien, perhaps dangerously so, someone who willfully ignores the spirits, the demons, the very God they know watches over them, and judges. Your calm, your science, becomes a terrifying, isolating form of otherness. And this terrifying otherness, your inability to even comprehend their world, is precisely where the true peril begins. It's not just that you don't understand them, it's that they now see you as something fundamentally wrong, something that needs to be rooted out. The social fabric itself, the very weave of their community, tightens against you, not as a safety net, but as a snare, its threads woven from fear and ancient belief. Imagine the moment the accusation truly lands, perhaps a hushed word that spreads like wildfire through the narrow, muddy lanes, or a pointed finger in the village square, suddenly isolating you in a bubble of dread. There's no comforting legal shield here, no advocate stepping forward to patiently untangle the charges. Instead, you might face the local reeve, his face etched with the grim satisfaction of duty, or the parish priest, his eyes reflecting a fearful certainty that chills you to the bone. The very air around you would seem to curdle, thick with a suspicion that feels almost greasy to the touch. Whispers, sharp and insistent as winter winds, would precede you, a rustling tide of fear and condemnation. The systems in place, such as they were, weren't designed to sift for innocence. They were geared towards processing an accusation, often towards a predetermined conclusion. Think of it less as a court of law and more as a community ritual, a desperate way to excise a perceived taint from their midst, to restore a fragile sense of order. Your erstwhile neighbors, individuals who yesterday might have shared a meager piece of bread or a worried glance about the coming frost, now become a gallery of hostile, frightened, or even morbidly fascinated faces. They need this to be true. A scapegoat is a powerful, if terrible, balm for collective anxiety. Your pleas, your logical arguments, would fall on ears already attuned to the whispers of the demonic, finding damning confirmation in your very strangeness. This wasn't a system designed for your nuanced defense, for the patient unraveling of shades of gray. Theirs was a world painted in stark, uncompromising contrasts. Good versus evil, God versus the devil, a cosmic battle playing out in their very fields and homes. And evil to them wasn't some distant philosophical concept to be debated in quiet cloisters. It was a tangible presence, a chilling miasma that could blight the harvest, sour the milk, or steal the breath from a sleeping child. Imagine for a moment the air in that makeshift courtroom, perhaps a hastily cleared barn or a cold stone church. It would be thick, not just with the smell of unwashed bodies, damp earth, and lingering wood smoke, but with a palpable fear, a genuine collective terror of the unseen forces they believed you now represented. Your carefully constructed arguments, your pleas for reason, for a simple misunderstanding or a neighbor's petty grudge, would ripple outwards and then simply dissipate, absorbed by a conviction far older and more visceral than any single voice. Compassion, as we might hope for it, that gentle understanding of another's plight, was a fragile bloom, easily trampled when they believed they were faced with a supernatural threat of such magnitude. It wasn't necessarily a deliberate cruelty, but a worldview where protecting the entire community from perceived cosmic evil, from the very touch of Satan, fundamentally reshaped their understanding of justice. Their justice was about spiritual cleansing, a desperate, often brutal surgery to save the collective soul. In that moment, you weren't just a person anymore, not really. You had become a vessel, a symptom of a much larger, terrifying disease they felt compelled to excise. And so, that chilling tableau, born of such profound and collective fear, begins to dissolve around you, like ink dropped into water, slowly dispersing until it's just a memory of a darker shade. The damp chill you might have imagined clinging to your skin, seeping from rough-hewn stone walls, the kind of cold that seems to carry the very scent of old despair and forgotten sorrows, now steadily loosens its grip. The murmur of the crowd, a sound once so close, so freighted with the heavy weight of judgment and their own desperate fear, fades further and further into the distance. It becomes no more than a sighing wind heard from very far away, and then, at last, a profound and welcome silence. The flickering, uncertain light of a tallow candle, or the harsh, unforgiving glare of accusation in too many eyes, softens, blurs, and finally gives way to the gentle, restful darkness behind your own eyelids. Allow those echoes of a distant, deeply troubled past to recede completely now, like the tide pulling away from the shore, taking with it the debris of that imagined day. Let the cold weight of their fear, their desperate certainties, lift from your shoulders, replaced by a sense of quiet release. Feel instead the soft, unwavering support beneath you, the gentle, reassuring weight of your own blanket, a comforting presence in the still, quiet air of your room. The air here is calm, untroubled by the acrid scent of wood smoke or the heavy perfume of incense, untainted by the sharp tang of collective anxiety. There are no shadows here that hold judgment, only the familiar, soothing contours of your own safe haven. This is your space, your time, and it is inherently peaceful. Let the last vestiges of that other, harsher world drift away, carried softly on the outbreath, making way for the quiet, steady rhythm of your own deeply peaceful sleep. Thank you for joining us on Restful Historian. Until our next story, may your thoughts be calm and your rest deep.